Greetings. Our nation is at risk. So said Ronald Reagan's Presidential Commission in 1983 on public education in these United States. The commission reported, our nation is at risk. I want to read to you a few sentences which highlight the conclusions of this commission. The educational foundations of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens the very future of our nation and people. That was written a generation ago. It was a result of this report and others. I realized this long before, that Cindy and I homeschooled our 5 daughters. All the way from the beginning through high school, we homeschooled them. Because our schools were at risk. They were a risky place to be. Now, I knew that long before the Presidential Commission. Matter of fact, I told Cindy, any wife I married, I expected her to homeschool, and we'd work on it together. My main thrust of my ministry would be on campus, and she would teach the children at home. It goes on to say, if an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might have viewed it as an act of war. An act of war. Folks, I'm afraid things haven't gotten any better in public education, despite various attempts to reform. I suppose some were for the good. Most things the government does, that just ends up making things worse. Basically, the biggest reform we need is to the local schools get control of the public schools once again, or just privatize all the schools. Or maybe the virus is taking care of the situation by closing them down. Make the parents homeschool their children. Of course, maybe they won't get any education whatsoever. They might not even learn the 3 R's with the schools closed. As you know, I'm a former instructor in American history. I've taught American history at the junior high, high school, and college level. The last teaching job I had was an instructor in history at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. When I was a boy in school, I took a course in American history in the 6th grade. We took another course of American history in the 8th grade. And then when I was a junior in high school, you had to take a course in American history. So in my education through elementary, junior high, and high school, I had 3 courses in American history. And obviously, our youth do not know American history very well. Or what they have learned, we're seeing the fruits of it in our streets with the rioters, the anarchists who have no respect or regard for the American heritage, which is, well, worse than a shame. It's an act of war against the United States to destroy our heritage and replace it with a socialist, communistic heritage. One of the leading textbooks used in both high school and college today on American history is by Howard Zinn. It's a people's history of the United States. Now, Zinn has admitted, he's quite frank, at least he acknowledges he's not objective. He's got his bias. He says, I'm somewhat of a Marxist, somewhat of a socialist, somewhat of an anarchist. He's passed away now. I believe he died about a decade ago. But he's still having an influence through this book, A People's History of the United States. It says on the cover of the book, Zinn, this book, known for its lively, clear prose, is scholarly research. It's the only volume to tell America's story from the point of view and the words of America's women, factory workers, African Americans, Native Americans, the working poor, and immigrant laborers. As a historian, Zinn shows many of our country's greatest battles, fights for fair wages, 8-hour workdays, child labor laws, health and safety standards, universal suffrage, women's rights, racial equality were carried out at the grassroots level against bloody resistance. Now, in answer to Zinn's book, I have a good number of history textbooks in my library. This is one, it's called A Patriot's History of the United States, which is quite in contrast with Zinn's volume of history. And let's face it, our schools aren't turning out patriots today. Now, there are various theories of history that I won't go into with a lot of depth in this particular talk I'm having with you. But there are those historians who teach that our history is a result of impersonal forces, impersonal social, economic forces. Of course, the Marxists consider primarily economic forces when studying and interpreting and writing history. And of course, the economy has its influence, no one can doubt. But is it a determining factor? If we're going to say there is one determining factor in history, I happen to hold to the great man or great men theory of history, that history is moved by great men. Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Alexander the Great, and centuries ago in ancient history, Alexander the Great and the Caesars. Napoleon was a 19th century figure. But we're talking primarily about America. And there's no one that has had a greater impact on American history than Christopher Columbus. And Christopher Columbus has really been under attack. Cindy and I spent 15 years of our marriage living in Central Ohio. We actually lived within the city limits of Columbus, Ohio, for several years. And Columbus, Ohio is named, of course, after Christopher Columbus. And virtually every state in the Union, I would venture to say possibly every state in the Union, has a town or a city named Columbus. There's a city named Columbus here in Indiana, my home state. And they just took down a statue of Columbus that was around City Hall in Columbus, Ohio. What would they want to do next? Change the name of the city of Columbus, which is, of course, the capital of Ohio? That'd be a logical thing to follow up with by after tearing down the statues because he's, in their minds, such a bad character. There's another statue at the State House so far that's been preserved, and I believe there was just a vote recently in the Ohio legislature for preserving and holding up the statue of Columbus around the State House. They took one down at Columbus State College, a beautiful, huge statue at Columbus State College. It's when we started off as a community college, it's now a 4-year college. Columbia, where Columbus is pointing westward. I preached on that campus many times, and our daughters, when we took them to campus with us, would play around that statue. They love that statue, and I'm sure remember it. And so it was Columbus who led the period of the great exploration of the world. We say Columbus discovered America. Well, he wasn't the first European to be in America, but he discovered it and made the way for European migration to what became known as the New World. And of course, Columbus didn't start off to find a new world or looking for America. He was wanting to find trade routes to India. But he was a great man, great adventurer, great navigator. I would say the greatest man of the 15th century. So our president, Donald Trump, has proposed a garden of national heroes, a garden of American heroes. Who do you think ought to be included in that? Who are the great men that have transformed and changed this country? Often great men have the opportunity for greatness because of great events that took place during their presidency. What was the greatest event of the 18th century? Well, of course, the American Revolution and the establishment of our constitutional republic. Who was the leading figure in all that? Of course, the father of our country, first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen, none other than President George Washington. And they've had the audacity to even pull down his statue in several places. In other places, it's been threatened. About the 19th century, what was the watershed event? What was the main event in American history in the 19th century? What would it be? The Civil War. I believe there have been more books written on the Civil War than I once read this than any other war. I don't know. I can't document that for you, but read that some time ago. And Americans still tend to be fascinated by the Civil War or the war between the states. And of course, that made the opportunity for Lincoln to rise up to greatness. And as far as presidents, Lincoln is generally regarded as the greatest president of the 19th century. Who are American heroes? He's regarded as American hero, as is Washington, our founding fathers, of course. And we come to the 20th century. What are the greatest events of the 20th century that really were watershed, that changed America or even influenced the world? I would say World War I and World War II. Primarily, of course, World War II. So this gives generals an opportunity. A Civil War, you have Grant. on the north, Lee in the south. In the World War II, of course, Pershing is remembered primarily through General Pershing through World War I, and he landed in France with American forces, American Expeditionary Forces, and he got off the ship and he said, "Lafayette, we are here." It was General Lafayette and France that came to America's aid during our Revolutionary War. So we were now returning the favor. Lafayette, we are here to help you out, just as France helped us out. And of course, then France gave us the Lady Liberty, the Liberty in New York's harbor. The Statue of Liberty. When will they try to go after the Statue of Liberty? Tear that down. They want to go after all these monuments, all these symbols. With them, American history did not begin in 1776. It began in 1619 with the introduction of slavery to the New World in Virginia. That's how they want to date it. They see everything around slavery and racism. These anarchists, these socialists, these Marxists. Who else? Well, of course, Roosevelt. He was commander-in-chief in World War II. That gave him an opportunity for greatness. He broke with Washington, and that Washington would only serve, he set the president of only serving 2 terms. Franklin ran 4 times and was elected 4 times. He died during his 4th administration, and Truman took over. And consequently, we passed an amendment of the Constitution that the president can only serve 2 terms. So Trump has often mentions Patton. That seems to be his favorite one, General Patton. And I can see why. The two are a lot alike. Both of them were very outspoken men. And could be rough and rude at times even. But also, Patton, when he wanted to be, could be very much of the gentleman. So there's a lot of similarities between Patton and Trump. General MacArthur, he often names MacArthur as a great American hero. So they came out of the war. What is the greatest event of the 21st century so far? Well, we're pretty young into that, only 20 years into the 21st century. What would we say, 9/11? But I don't know whether 9/11, I remember during 9/11, we'll never forget, we'll never forget, we'll never forget. Well, I'm afraid we have largely forgotten. So I think after 9/11, Bush had the opportunity, G.W. Bush had the opportunity for greatness by defeating completely the Islamic menace. He did not do that. We had a war with Iraq. Their national religion was Islam. And after we won, we helped them draw up a constitution, and they made Islam their national religion again. We should have said, no, it's going to be Christianity. Or we can have it like we have it in America today. We're going to respect all religions. We're not going to single one out. What is the greatest event of the 20th century so far? In my opinion, it's the election of Donald Trump in 2016. And I'm confident that he'll be reelected and serve another 4 years. He's a mover. He's a shaker. He's had impact the world's attention has been on Donald J. Trump since 2015 for the last 5 years. He's dominated the news, not just America, but throughout the world. So he's proposed this national monument. Now, what the question I have for you is, some of you watching, hello, Stephen, Missy, who do you think are the greatest Americans that should be in this garden of heroes, of American heroes that Trump has proposed? And the real issue, the real question is, what standard do we appeal to determine whether or not these people are great? I mean, to some people, Karl Marx was the greatest man. Well, I think most Americans don't care for Marx too much, but it's according to what your philosophy is. So, great Americans, great American heroes would be ones who uphold the values of America as expressed, I would say, in the Declaration of Independence, which I lectured to you on the other day, that promotes self-government, that promote life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So do these heroes live up to these ideals, and did they promote these ideals? Did they advance these ideals? And if they haven't done anything to live up to these ideals, to advance the ideals expressed in the Declaration of Independence, then I don't think they should be in the garden of American heroes. So, I don't know. I think Trump may have opened up a can of worms with his proposal. And sometimes presidents make proposals. This is an executive action. I think Congress has to appropriate the money. And there'll be a lot of arguments as to who should be included in greatness. We're already having those. How are we going to settle it? Well, as I say, if this does get accomplished, we have to agree on what constitutes greatness. So who would you, Ronald Reagan. All right, Frank, I would agree with that. Ronald Reagan is part of the statuary in the Capitol building. Each state can have two statues representing their state in the statue gallery as you go in the House of Representatives and the House of Congress. Ronald Reagan. Certainly he held up these ideals of the Declaration of Independence, believed in limited government, individual responsibility, promoted private property. He was a self-made man. We think ideally Americans should be self-made men. He started off just a radio announcer. His father was a shoe salesman and an alcoholic, I'm afraid. So he didn't grow up with great advantage, but he accomplished great. Became the star in Hollywood and governor of California, and advanced on to become president of the United States. Who else? Anybody else want to post anybody? I want to read over this list that Trump has proposed. See what you think. Do you agree with all these people? And to get us in the garden of gods, not in the garden of gods, in the garden of great American heroes, he has suggested All right. John Adams, second President of the United States. Susan B. Anthony, going for women's suffrage, extending the vote. Of course, universal suffrage was not part of the original vision of our founding fathers. You basically had to be a property owner to vote. And their thinking was you ought to have something invested in the country before you can decide what direction the country is going to be taking. And you have many people, they're just, well, on the dole, basically. They're not contributing anything. And they think they ought to vote. So what they'll vote for, anyone who makes them the greatest promises and more handouts. And so she wanted to get the women in there. We won't try to undo that. Getting the women. Daniel Boone. Well, who can deny Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett. Frederick Douglass. Well, that's one of the black men in America who came into early prominence, but we have to be careful we don't get this diversity element in, We're going to have an equal amount of women to men. The blacks must be at least represented proportionally to whites. Of course, got to get a few Asian Americans in there. That's what I'm afraid it'll all come down to. Not so much maybe they were great by the standards of the contribution of black people or Asian people, but let's face it, the people who made the greatest contributions to America, as far as greatness goes, or reached heroic proportions, were Europeans, people of European descent, whether you like it or not. That's just a fact of history. Amelia Earhart, I don't know, first really prominent women aviator. I guess that's important. I think personally she's overrated. Billy Graham. Yes, Renee suggests Billy Graham, of course. And Trump mentions Billy Graham. Billy Graham probably preached to more people than anyone alive. Well, he's dead now, but during his time, or anyone before that time. There's great crusades, and then, of course, preached also over television. Converted many souls into the kingdom. So I think we want to be careful about getting all politicians in there too. So I'm glad you mentioned a minister. What other great ministers should we have? Of course, if you have a Protestant, Catholics come along and say, well, we need to be represented too. Catholics. Any Catholics out there? What Catholic minister would you say made the greatest contribution to American history? Well, I would I would recommend Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, who was a prominent televangelist, really before Graham even, in the 1950s, perhaps more prominent as a television evangelist than Graham. He had a weekly program with high ratings. And he was a patriot, by the way, and often spoke out against Marxism and communism. So he stood up politically as well as religiously for the American ideals. But then someone would come along and say, well, we got to have Islam. What if Islam represented? No, we don't. Because everything Islam stands for is contrary to Christianity, Judaism, and American ideals. but you can be sure there'll be a clamor to get some Muslim up there. So we want literary figures too. What literary figures would you suggest? Philosophers that have had a great impact on the nation philosophically. And of course, we'll want our share of entertainers and sports figures. You know how big America is for entertainment and sports figures. So, got to have John Wayne as, you know, a Hollywood star. But they want to rename John Wayne Airport. So they won't want to have John Wayne. John Wayne, to them, was a bigot for some reason. I don't know why. But I don't know. You know, it's a nice idea, but I don't know whether Trump's idea is really going to be practical. But I think Trump is, you're tearing down the statue, I'll show you, I'll build more statues. Isn't that Trump? That's his counterpunch. Generals, of course, MacArthur, Grant, Audie Murphy. Yes, not all of them are generals. We got to get Audie Murphy in there. I agree with that. Oh well, you know, we can Martin Luther King, sure. We'll accept him. Some of these people, I guess I don't know. Christy McCullough, who was that? Is she an astronaut or what? Jackie Robinson, sports figure, okay. We all like Jackie. Jackie Robinson, one of my heroes. I loved baseball when I was a boy growing up. He was one of my heroes. Dodgers. Of course, again, another woman you got to get in there is Betsy Ross, gave us the flag. The Wright brothers, these are some of the ones he magazines. Johnny Cash, all right. Oh, Frank, Johnny Cash. He's one of my favorites. You know, the thing about Johnny Cash, one thing I've noticed, he appeals to, I got hippie, radical, Marxist friends, acquaintances at least, who like Johnny Cash. And then, you know, straight people, the rednecks like Johnny Cash. And, you know, that says a lot for the Johnny Cash, that he could have appeal beyond, say the traditional hillbilly. That's what they used to call country music. Used to be called hillbilly music. Yeah, and Johnny Cash, a lot of his songs deal with America. Booker T. Washington would be a good one. I think that's one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most outstanding black men in American history is Booker T. Washington. I don't think he'd be appreciated by these radicals. I think they might even tear down his statue. I understand that the statue of Frederick Douglass was brought down by these rioters, these looters, these anarchists. Ray Charles, all right, for an entertainer, yeah. My wife lived in Albany, Georgia, and Ray Charles lived in Albany for a while, and they have in a park there they have a statue of Ray Charles. Accomplished, he had a blind guy, didn't let that stop him, and he became a great success, great American entertainer. So yeah. Ray Charles. How about philosophers? Who else literary figures, we still haven't named any of those. How about James Fenimore Cooper? You know, the leather stocking tales? He wrote about Americana, especially the American Indian and the pioneers and riflemen and in the northeastern part of the United States. Mark Twain, of course. What literary figures is more American than Mark Twain? Samuel Clemens, he's got to be in there. Let's see, John, glad to have you watching. What American hero would you like to see in Trump's National Garden of American Heroes? One thing about that's happened with this tearing down of the statues, it's gotten people to think about American history. And that's good. That's encouraging. As I say, a few of these names I'm going to have to lift up. I don't know who that Krista McCullough is. I'm guessing she was one of the first lady astronauts or whatever. I don't know. Name seems familiar to me. So we need to study, ponder American history. I believe we can all be great. Any of us can be great. And by the way, Zinn's book, it's written from I don't mind him giving a view of history from the so-called common man. You know, sometimes you say, well, who's your hero? Well, my father was my hero. Well, that's good, and I trust all of us should be able to say that, and had good fathers, and we listened to them. Some of us rebelled against them for a time, and old age, maybe we've come to appreciate our fathers. Oral Roberts. My goodness, yes. Who could forget Oral Roberts? Okay, now Frank has come up with Rocky. Rocky wasn't a real person. But we have these mythical characters, these characters in fiction, that they take on a certain reality to us, do they not? And sometimes these people become so legendary, like David Crockett and Daniel Boone, it's difficult to separate the myth from the legend. And when a person reaches legendary status, I think it's okay to build up myths around them as well. Oral Roberts, yes, greatest healing evangelist of the 20th century. Founded Oral Roberts University. So not just a preacher, but an educator. Moved out of the realm of preaching to go into education, and founded a university that has outstanding academic credentials. So yes, Oral Roberts. Well, maybe we don't have too many people tuned in. Anybody else with us out there? Please suggest. Then too, with that garden, it'll have to be constantly guarded. Be more statues we'll have to guard, because there'll be somebody that'll get in there that these people don't like. And the ones we mention, they don't like anyway. So, yeah, he was talking about, point of view of the common man, that's good. But these are common men that he lists that have basically a Marxist socialist point of view. And these are the people he glorifies. You can't be a great American and be a socialist. That goes against the American ideal. We have in my hometown, Terre Haute, Indiana, was the hometown, and where Eugene V. Debs visited, and we preserved his home here. I visited, and in some respects, I don't like his philosophy, but he was an outstanding orator, knew how to move men, and some things I like about Debs, but still I would not include him in the garden of American heroes, because he wanted to radically change and transform the American system, which has been changed. And what he ran for president, I think 5 times, once in prison. So I don't know, might consider Debs. After all, we do respect people that stand up for what they believe, but I can't make a hero out of Debs. Because, of course, you read Debs' platform today, it doesn't sound so radical. The Democrat Party has adopted it, largely the Republicans too. Well, our nation needs prayer. We've been hit by an enemy. The Marxists, socialists, have taken over our public schools, basically. And why not? I mean, aren't they really more or less a socialist institution? They're supported by tax money. They're government run. So let's get back to private schools. Maybe this virus and closing down of the schools will force people to get back to these parents, get together, and they say, well, I'm not doing too good in this homeschooling. So a group of parents in the neighborhood will get together, and they will have schools in their homes. Now they probably try to pass some laws against people gathering, assembling, which is against the First Amendment of the Constitution, assembling in people's homes. So it'll have to be done underground to a large extent until we begin to get the upper hand again. And so a lot of people I know that went into homeschooling, they're not continuing with their own children. Our daughter Evangelist has got, Evangeline has 2 of school age. They go to Lutheran school. Private school's all right, church school's fine, of course. And, oh yes, Rush Limbaugh. Of course, how could we forget him? He's right, in my opinion, Rush Limbaugh is right up there with Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Franklin, which you might say a philosopher, as is Rush Limbaugh. Rush paved the way by educating people to the principles by which Trump governs, of conservative principles. Rush Limbaugh prepared the American public for him. You might say Rush was the forerunner to Trump, like John the Baptist was the forerunner to Christ. Harriet Tubman, all right, yes. Help the Underground Railroad, help people escape slavery. Yes. Then we're going to put her on the $20 bill. That hasn't taken place yet. I say keep Jackson on one side and put Harriet Tubman on the other side. So few people are using cash anymore. All right, well, this is kind of rambling, but let's read up on American history. If you can read, and I don't have any objection to students reading this, especially at the college level. But this is the only point of view often they're getting now. And in our government schools, since they are government schools, it ought to be teaching from a point of view that promotes the American heritage, not something that is against it. So we have a lot of reading to do, a lot of studying to do, a lot of pondering to do. If you can get your education, basically you got to get it on your own. I must admit, I've learned a lot more since I graduated from college than I ever learned in college through independent study. Okay, Frank, Brother Frank, who's on here, mentions as great American heroes Jed and Cindy Smock. Well, maybe they could build a statue of me. Might be more appropriate on campus with my Bible in hand, holding up my Bible, and build statues of me all over campuses. How about that one? Or all the campuses I've been on. Well, I think for that to really happen, I'd have to yet promote a revival. We're getting a few saved here and there. We're plucking brands out of the fire over the years. And many campuses we go to, we had confessions of faith out of one or two, but as we begin to get scores or even hundreds converted, might deserve a statue. And some people recognize we need a statue to Brother Jed, and of course got to get the woman in there too. So Cindy and I will be preaching back to back maybe on a statue. And maybe, maybe yet I can qualify. It's not over yet. I don't think I qualify yet for the Garden of American Heroes that Trump has proposed and issued this executive order. But the best is yet to come. Trump just said the other day, the best is yet to come. So I'll take hold of that and say the best of my ministry is yet to come. And the most influence in my ministry is yet to come. So we'll see. But thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank Stanton, for your nomination as Brother Jed and Sister Cindy being great American heroes to be placed in the National Garden of American Heroes. We will accept that. And now we need to go to prayer for our country. Father, we pray that you'd raise up great Americans. We need great men and women, Lord. Yes, we'll include them. I don't care what race, personally, Lord, that Asian people have come over here and done very well. We need businessmen in there. We haven't named any businessmen. Andrew Carnegie, Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, right? And the Apple guy, what's his name? I can't think of it right now. He died a few years ago, died young. Made his contribution. And, got to appreciate the computer guys with their business acumen and gave us the computer. That's really changed things, made everything easier for us all, enabled us to have these sessions we're having today. So great men, a lot of great men, and a lot of people, ones are probably greater than the ones we really know about who reached celebrity status. A lot of great men never reach celebrity status, but I guess to qualify as a great American hero, you got to reach some sort of celebrity status. Wild Bill Hickok. Oh yeah, we can't forget those who settled the American West like that. Well, Father, so we raise up great Americans, Lord, that'll proclaim freedom throughout the land, that'll stand up for the Declaration of Independence, our ideals. Put down these small men, Lord, that are against American principles. Lord, that they might go into the oblivion, into the junk heap of history. Not that we're going to stare down the any statutes that people might have built to them. But sometimes you need those who set a contrast. The statue of Grant and Lee, fine with me, both of them. Hallelujah. Glory to God. So Lord, make America great again. Really transform our educational system. Turn it upside down with the closing of our schools. Lord, we just may have to start all over. It's that far gone. It's that bad. We may have to start all over. And take on the responsibility of educating our own children. Lord, to do that, we got to read up. We got to study. We got to sit our children together in front of us and say, I'm an American. You were born in America. That's a privilege. This is why. Talk about George Washington. Talk about these heroes to them. There's a film out there, that good movies made about these people. A lot of good, exciting information. They lived exciting lives. They lived dynamic lives. They influenced us. So we need a great revival in America. Help us to be instruments of revival. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Thank you. Hey, Scott. Glad to have you watching.